Today we're here to talk about universities and their estates and discuss what is being done to redevelop, reimagine and retrofit our higher education facilities to bring them in line with the expectations of the modern student and changing teaching methods. Around this table are people who are at the forefront of these projects, and we will hear firsthand about the opportunities and challenges facing universities as they vie to attract the best and brightest from around the world.
Traditionally, when students came to Salford, the expectation was often a typical tiered lecture theatre, lecturer at the front, big screen, everybody furiously writing notes, and that's the tradition of the lecture to most students. Prior to COVID, that did start to change and students became more discerning. What we found is that students were turning away from that, because if I was a student graduating in, say, law or accountancy, I wouldn't want to go and just sit in a very rigid structured office. I'd like to work in a quirky office with breakout space, with collaboration space, that I wasn't tied into my desk. That's what students expect now. And it's that through flow of university changing space and then potential employers having to follow suit and adapt to get the best students coming through. We are in the third decade of the 21st century. I think space has to reflect that, and the teaching methodology and the attitudes of the staff have to reflect that as well, because otherwise we won't be preparing young people to take that first step into work.
The drive around the master plans that we're seeing now is they're putting that well-being at the heart of those briefs. So there's learning spaces, there's open spaces inside and outside where students can congregate and learn and interact with their lecturers. And I know it's mentioned a little bit further on around industry, but we're also finding in terms of that's playing into now universities are much more engaged with industry partners, as in what initiatives they're looking at in the workspace, which is then reflected in the teaching institutions and some of the briefs that we're seeing. The connectivity now that universities have to reach out within local companies and industry, and I'm always really interested by the figures around students that choose to stay in a city or town post their education because they feel that connection with a place and a sense of we want to stay now and invest in the local economy and progress the next stage of our journey, career here.
It's always a balance, isn't it, this kind of delivering projects, and some of the things we've talked about there that are actually things that we're doing for the right reason to create the right kind of learning spaces for the future actually do help with the viability question, because if we can make our estates work more efficiently and we can use space better, it makes projects more viable. So, you know, sometimes the stars align and it helps, but it's no doubt that it's a challenging time for everybody. If we get it right, again, hopefully it means we're providing buildings that are more efficient, that from an OPEX perspective work better, but from a CapEx perspective there's always a bit of a balance there. So definitely challenging, but really encouraging to see so many universities who have put some really sort of thorough master plans and strategies in place that are enabling them to manage some unprecedented circumstances incredibly well. So I think universities who, like Salford, are able to explain, look, come be part of this fantastic city, look at what a great place it is to become an adult, look at not just your work life but everything else you get from as an adult in this city. That's really important in decision making as well, and people are weighing that up perhaps in a way that we didn't before, and are seeing that their work is a very important part of their life, but it's not all, and they want to be rounded.
You know, we now live in a virtual world. You know, virtual classrooms are ever more on the horizon, or, you know, distance learning and collaboration with other people. So that use of technology within universities is ever more important, and how it's integrated and seamless. Some buildings, you know, are at the end of their life and, you know, should be demolished. You know, they're not of a certain quality, but we've looked at some campuses and they can be quite defensive. They don't turn to face streets. They don't have presence, you don't have visual surveillance, but it doesn't necessarily mean the building should be demolished. You know, you've got to look at ways to turn the face of the building, re-engage to the street, look at the public realm, to enhance the estate and the campus. I think we all have to come together as a team to look at what is important, from the client and the pedagogy and the teaching, all the way through to the architecture and the placemaking, and then through to sustainability. So it's about weaving all of those key elements together that create successful projects and architecture that will carry on, all beyond our life, really. That's the dream, really, isn't it, to have a project that is here longer than we all are.
You have to borrow from other people. That's how you learn, and that's why those collaboration spaces work so well. You're not going to meet unless you've got those incidental spaces, and that's something that we're finding in most of our buildings now. That collaboration space, that kind of atrium, that street, that staircase might be the place where a whole new idea gets created, and then you can go off to a little collaboration zone or a meeting room or book out a space and develop those ideas. But having flexible furniture that, just one lecturer can come in and change the room in 5 minutes before they come in, that's quite important, I think. We did a series of rooms where they trialled different furniture, and that was quite interesting. They kind of QR code outside, and they got the students to vote on which ones they preferred, so that when they went away and did their teaching buildings, they could see what worked and what worked for the lecturers as well. The way it's going forward is that, things are available not just for the people that might be based in the building, but for the wider campus, as well as people that might be visiting, because you quite often get visiting lecturers, visiting PhD, so they need somewhere to go. And I think that's the idea, that you can book those spaces and you've got a space where you can maybe get on with what research you might have been doing at a university in the south of England that you can do in the north.
As an engineering consultant, what we are taking as a key part of our brief nowadays is design of a future flexibility, and a lot of that becomes about how spaces are designed architecturally. From an engineering point of view, it becomes about fundamentally how you can change and repurpose them, how you can establish grids to give flexibility, loads to give flexibility, and sort of structural performance that can facilitate future reuse, really, and remodelling. Because the one thing in an uncertain world that is certain is that things are going to change. The materials we're using in buildings, the construction industry is clearly experiencing a lot of legacy issues around materials and what's been used and the problems they've caused stakeholders and building owners. There's a lot now about how we future-proof against that from a structural perspective. There's the drive about sustainability and a desire to use far more sustainable materials. With that creates new considerations and new risks, really. Make sure we're using appropriate materials that are going to provide the design life and performance required.
I guess the biggest challenge is de-risking any project, especially in the climate we've discussed. What we bring to the table is our expertise, how to de-risk the project and guarantee safe delivery of the vision. It's just really trying to come to a point in time where we can guarantee a safe delivery of the project within the project budget. You have to be a bit creative in terms of how do you deliver what the client wants, and this is where good design comes in, because good design doesn't have to cost a lot. The best thing is probably to have a closer connection with the business, to actually not to have a relationship, and maybe to nurture a relationship between universities and businesses. You have to bring them under your wing.
It's very much design teams moving from kind of building design into experience design and making that crossover and trying to understand what immersive learning is all about. But it's actually about creating a community, creating a campus. And then I think the other side of it is this experience thing, is the ability to have that quality that's just running through, just having the quality of experience right the way through, from the accommodation, from the teaching environments to the campus, and everything working efficiently, just carving away the inefficiencies that we see on many campuses, and that being the enabler to bringing about the sort of quality of experience that I think universities are craving.